despite the prosecution's attempt out of every witness that they've brought forward so far in this Diddy case to release explosive evidence, it seems as if the defense has flipped it to decentralize the prosecution's case. Let's get into some of this straight game.
Life is like some cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.
Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. It's your boy DELRAY, Richardson, Platinum Artist, Platinum Songwriter, Straight Game TV. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your time. Do me a favor, click on what appears to be the little bell notification. Also subscribe to your channel if you have not already. And like I always say, if you want to be one of the first people notified when I drop some of this straight game, please do me a favor and click on what appears to be that little bell notification right below this video. I'm going to get right into it. Ladies and gentlemen, look, like I said, there's been a lot of witnesses that have come forward so far in this Diddy case. And when you understand what it is so far, it seems as if the prosecution believes that most of what they've had on display is explosive. But from experts, from the experts who have really studied the case and understand law, certain trial lawyers across the country. Basically, we in week 2, right? The Combs trial, and the prosecution has brought up witnesses that basically try to corroborate Kathy Ventura's story of abuse. And so much so, a lot of them have done. A lot of the witnesses have, basically corroborated, that Diddy was violent, and domestic violence is something that he usually practices from that perspective, right? But also, every time it seems that the prosecution tries to lay out a certain thing, from my perspective, I haven't really seen anything involving racketeering yet through the independent witnesses to establish the elements of sex trafficking, racketeering. There's a lot of people in the legal profession who believe the defense scored major league points, right, on cross-examination, but they still think that they have a ways to go. Like I said, one can be desensitized to that video as we've seen it more and more and more. Namely, I would say Kid Cudi's was the latest explosive testimony that I think everybody was waiting for. I think it was Kid Cassie, and then everybody else was waiting for Kid Cudi. Based on the fact, for the RICO Act, there's like fire and there's certain elements, right? And I think they were trying to point out the element that what Kid Cudi alleged that Diddy blew up his car and allegedly broke into his house, right? Like I said, however, most experts who talked about this case, right, say that the defense is doing a hell of a job using the prosecution's witnesses to bolster their arguments during the cross-examination. And we heard Brian Steele, Tina Garagos, and the like, right? They said the defense is doing a great job at exploiting witnesses' testimony to support their theory of the case that show Mr. Combs may have been a bad actor when it comes to the domestic violence aspect. Without a doubt, we see that Diddy's a weak guy, you know what I mean? And then some of the other sexual, explicit stuff that, most of us probably could care less about what Diddy doing in his lifestyle. In his life or in his bedroom, right? So like I said, like nobody's condoning that. Nobody's saying, he should get off for that. Like I said, most people feel like he should have been locked up a long time ago for that, as a matter of fact, right? But most of the federal charges that have come about and that he's actually being charged with One of them not domestic violence. The federal charges are unsubstantiated based on the testimony that we've heard so far. So none of the transporting, people across state lines for prostitution, the RICO, other RICO elements, none of those charges, based on the 6 witnesses that they put up so far, have been substantiated, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, you've heard various news outlets come out and try to bolster the fact that, this witness here is laying down, some of the RICO elements and things like that. It is simply not so. You know what I mean? This is not pro Diddy, bias Diddy. This is just simply, if you're listening and you're following along, like one person who really has it out for Diddy is Nancy Grace. I don't know if y'all watch Nancy Grace. Nancy Grace pulled out the Tootsie Roll, her little Southern accent. Diddy, I think that I feel like eating this Tootsie Roll. She got her little Southern accent, you know what I mean? And then she says, I think I lost my appetite, and it's because of you, Diddy. And it's so funny because Nancy Grace said, look, a lot of people, and Nancy Grace fair to her, if you on trial and she don't like you or like the what you being charged with, she usually comes for you with that little Southern drawl and how she does what she does, right? No knock to her, but her characterization of what's been going on is simply not true, right? A lot of the charges are unsubstantiated based on the testimony that we've heard so far. Basically, while nobody can hear the testimony in real time, right? We can basically through inner city press and a lot of these other people who are in the courtroom who are trying to transcribe it to us, right? Today, the government is not meeting their burden to date. They're not. They're simply not, right? You know what I mean? They're not. And so when you deal with, like I said, a lot of lawyers like in L.A., New York, who are not actually on the case, right? Noted that the jury has heard consistent testimony from the witnesses. Reasonable doubt looms very heavy, right? So basically, from the witnesses, there's a lot of reasonable doubt, even from Kid Cudi's standpoint when Brian Steele had him up there. You know what I mean? He kind of like dismantled everything that Kid Cudi had to say. You know what I mean? Like I say, to date, we've heard consistent testimony from several of the witnesses that Diddy was violent with Cassie Ventura. He was controlling over her, instructed what to do in the freak-offs. We know, and was very jealous. He was a jealous boyfriend. But none of this is sufficient to justify a criminal enterprise or a pattern of criminal conduct. Most people don't understand that, right? Once again, we know Diddy is violent. We know he's controlling. We know he's insecure. All of those things exist, right? But none of this information that these people have come up, these witnesses have come up and stated as of today is sufficient to justify a criminal enterprise, right? Or a pattern of criminal conduct. And I'll say this, criminal conduct based on what? Usually, like I said, mafia situations where they're racketeering, they're extorting, they're selling drugs, or whatever they're doing, right? One usually has paper trails, witnesses who have participated in the criminal enterprise can tell you certain things that they've done. Now, somebody goes and buys drugs for you or says that they're alleged to go buy drugs from you, that's not running a criminal enterprise. That's supporting a dope habit. You know what I mean? We know that Diddy went to the rehab. None of that says criminal enterprise. He went bought drugs. I bought drugs from him. I cleaned up the hotel room, after, they got finished doing the freak off or whatever. None of what that is or that information supports any kind of criminal enterprise. Furthermore, you've heard none of the witnesses say or be asked straight out, flat out, do you believe that you were involved in a criminal enterprise and working for Bad Boy Entertainment? Do you believe that there was a criminal enterprise that was being ran and you were part of that criminal enterprise? And see, so if you give somebody immunity, right? Usually, like Sammy the Bull Gravano involving the John Gotti case and all of those things, right? Sammy the Bull was granted a certain leniency from the court as he testified to all of the murders and things that he was involved in, right? So by him doing that, Sammy the Bull Granos is back on the streets again, even after all of the treachery and things that, you know, he admitted that he caused, right? So now, but Sammy the Bull admitted to his crimes that supported the racketeering, the corrupt organization, the extortion, the murders. He admitted to all of those crimes. You have heard none of the witnesses involved in this case admit to any real crimes that they've committed. Yeah, buying drugs is illegal, but like I said, if you buying them to use, you know what I mean? You know, that gets a different look as if you buying 50 kilos of cocaine. It just does. You know what I mean? So if you're going to buy 8-ball for Diddy and he don't even know about it, in one instance, the guy went, there was some, I think, the Turks and Caicos or somewhere like that, and the assistant dude went to buy the drugs, 8-ball, he said, from somebody, and Diddy didn't even know about it. He was just trying to, you know, score some points, right? That's not part of no criminal enterprise, man. You know, you got the little handyman, the kid that was, when they were about to get on the jet, they locked him up because he had, I think, pink cocaine or something like that, liquid cocaine, something like that, right? That's not Diddy's. Now, what they found in the house can be basically attributed to him, but was that for personal use? Or was that for, you know, to put on the block in parts of Miami, Nashville, North Carolina, you know, South Carolina to start getting some money? No. Diddy got most of his money, as we know, from the liquor deals, selling records, making music, and other basically businesses that he has, right? So, you know, so when you understand that, right, Cassie's relationship can be easily characterized as she was in love with Diddy, right? Basically, she admitted to that, right? She performed freak offs because of her feelings for him and stayed with him for personal benefits, such as furthering her career, developing connections, and being taken care of financially. All of these things are true. All of them are true. Like I said, even when the girl Carrie Morgan got into her situation, she stopped being friends with Cassie based on the fact when Diddy allegedly assaulted her, that Cassie didn't even support the girl. But when Cassie had her problems, the girl Carrie Morgan, she basically called the police. And then Cassie wouldn't give up no information, nothing, right? Because if Diddy goes to jail based on domestic violence, anything, the gravy train stops. It's just as simple as that. Like I said, everybody can come up with these old surreptitious ass excuses as to why they think what it is. You know, 9 times out of 10, things usually boil down to money, right? The things and the way things are structured from that perspective, right? You know, so she basically stayed there. You know, and that's not saying that she did. That's what it was. Diddy bought her apartment, car, her phone, her clothes, you know, all of the things. He basically supplied her lifestyle. Now, one can say, you know what? I'm done with this shit. I'm going back home with my mama. Cassie had that right. As a matter of fact, she did. You know, she went back home with her mama so tough that Kid Cudi testified that, I think it was in the Christmas of 2011, or December 2011, Kid Cudi said he spent Christmas down at Cassie's house in Connecticut. So she was free to do what she wanted to do. It wasn't like Diddy had private investigators flying around seeing what she was doing and all of that. It simply wasn't that, as much as they want us to believe that, right? And so basically, when you understand that, reasonable doubt, simple reasonable doubt looms very heavily in these first 2 weeks of the trial. The prosecution will need to bring out additional victims that are not girlfriends. Listen to me. Additional victims that are not girlfriends. You can't bring out somebody who somebody used to date and say that person that they used to date was sex trafficking the person that they used to date. That simply won't work. It simply won't work. Dawn Ricard, she basically came out and tried to cover one of the elements of basically forced labor, you know, in racketeering. That's the RICO Act. That's one of the elements in forced labor. But when they asked Dawn Ricard, well, you know, what was being forced upon you in regards to you saying forced labor? And she said, I ain't get enough sleep. That ain't have nothing to do with saying somebody, if you work 20 hours a day, 16 hours a day, okay, cool. You know, it wasn't like nobody was like, you know, don't let her go sleep. You can't go sleep. You got to work. No, it simply wasn't that. So, I mean, you would think that the threats of violence and all of these things as to her being forced to come into work and you don't come into work, I'm sending such and such to get you and we're going to, do you bodily harm. It simply was not the case. You know what I mean? And she didn't testify to that, right? Like I said, the prosecution will need to bring out additional victims that are not girlfriends of Diddy to separate a romantic, emotionally charged relationship from actual sex trafficking. Did you hear that? The prosecution will need to bring out additional victims, right, that are not girlfriends of Diddy's to separate a romantic, emotionally charged relationship from actual sex trafficking, right? I think one of the people who could, and like I said, who could speak on this very, very detailed is Gorgeous Dre. Gorgeous Dre, who was an American Pimp and real good dude, very intelligent guy. He's out here on the circuit teaching men about self-confidence and how men to be real true men, and through based on his game approach and how he approached situations and dealing with women and just being a man in general, right? I think because he caught a similar situation in dealing with that, and he went to federal prison for something not, I wouldn't say same as what Diddy, but Dre was in the lifestyle. He was an actual pimp. Like I say, he was in the Hughes brother film American Pimp. I think that's someone who can articulate what that is, sex trafficking and what that means. So, like I said, a lot of people have just come to these, crazy conclusions about that, right? Like I said, we heard from Kid Cudi, right, who testified that he had a romantic relationship with Diddy's ex in 2011. Kid Cudi testified that when Diddy found out about the relationship, he broke into the musician's home. This is what Kid Cudi testified to, right? And later allegedly set fire to his car. However, listen, this is what Kid Cudi testified to. However, this is Kid Cudi just saying that, right? Right? There was no definitive evidence to prove Kid Cudi's claims. None, right? Other than him saying it. There was no evidence. None. No fingerprints, no pictures, no eyewitnesses, none of that, right? Basically, Ventura told Kid Cudi that Combs would hit and kick her, but Combs' lawyers elicited testimony that Cassie never said anything about sexual abuse, right? Once again, the sex trafficking aspect of the elements of the RICO Act, right? So Kid Cudi was up there testifying that, Cassie told me that, Diddy would hit and he would kick her, but on cross-examination, right? Mr. Steele, Brian Steele got Kid Cudi to admit, but Cassie never said anything about sexual abuse. And Kid Cudi said, no, she never talked about anything like that. Boom, right? This is what the prosecution is alleging, right? Like I said, other people, who's sitting back and you actually watching and say, Kid Cudi broke up with Cassie, right? Because she was, Kid Cudi said that Cassie broke up with Diddy because he was violent. This is what Cassie told Kid Cudi, right? And he was concerned for his own safety when Kid Cudi broke up with Cassie. So once Diddy had found out, Diddy was upset because Diddy was the one that introduced Kid Cudi to Cassie and also paid Kid Cudi money to do work with Cassie from that perspective in doing music, right? He also said that Cassie was playing both him and Diddy. Brian Steele got Kid Cudi to admit that Cassie was playing both sides of the fence. So once again, they're basically talking about Cassie Ventura being this the ultimate victim, the number one witness, who is what the prosecution was saying, but the facts don't bear out what they were trying to say. Kid Cudi testified in court. Kid Cudi said basically he also said that Ventura was playing both him and Diddy. So basically that's the theory from the defense, that Ventura was a strong, independent woman who made her own decisions, right? Including willingly participating in the swingers lifestyle, in which we've seen so far, basically while, it was saying that Diddy had all the money, whatever, the guy who was the Punisher basically testified that, hey, you know what? when I got to the room, Cassie was the one that paid me. Well, before I got to the room, Cassie was the one that called me, talking about coming and doing some kind of striptease thing, for a group of women, for some kind of bachelorette party and things of that nature. And then when she got there, it simply wasn't so. It was, they wanted to do something with baby oil and all of these other things, right? Basically saying that Cassie was willing to lie, right, to achieve the goal of having a freak off. She was willing to lie to the person who they wanted to participate and lure him there under false pretenses. It wasn't for no bachelorette party. It was to have a freak off. And they would up the pay, right, to be able to do that. These are all facts. These are all facts. Testimony about Cassie, texting Diddy and talking about, yeah, she's horny. She wants to do this, that, and the other. She wants to freak off and so on and so forth, right? While there were flaws in the prosecution's presentation of Cudi's testimony, it was still important because arson, once again, listen, ladies and gentlemen, it was still important is because arson is an underlying crime for a RICO conspiracy. So Diddy allegedly blowing up the car, right, is an underlying crime for RICO. But once again, when you go back to it, there was no definitive evidence to prove that Diddy had anything to do with his car being blown up. Now, if they had pictures or they had video or they had something like that, oh, absolutely. You know what I mean? You could see Diddy being convicted thus far. But like I say, when you break down all of the elements so far that we know about the case, it's just simply not so, right? So, basically it allows the prosecution to potentially get a racketeering conviction, just with the alleging that Diddy had something to do with the arson aspect. That allows the prosecution to potentially get a racketeering conviction, even if the jury believes the freak-offs were consensual and there was no sex trafficking, right? So, trying to say, okay, they still could reach, if the jury felt like they wanted to reach, say, yeah, we believe that he blew up Kid Cudi's car, right? But there's no evidence. So my thing is, at the end of the day, that would be grounds for an appeal. You know what I mean? But once again, it's still an element that covers the RICO, an element under the RICO, right? But like I said, if the jury doesn't find trafficking, they can still convict on racketeering if they find that Combs engaged in kidnapping, arson, extortion, or prostitution, right? Say that again. If the jury doesn't find trafficking as an element of the RICO, they can still convict Diddy of racketeering if Combs has engaged in kidnapping, arson, extortion, or prostitution, right? And basically, they were trying to lay the groundwork with the prostitution thing. And this is another thing that they never really showed or pointed out, was the fact that, the prostitution thing, well, who, and this is the thing, it's so crazy because the government is like, wow. So basically, Cassie doing all the paying of the money, right? Basically says that she complicit in the whole thing. But the government is asking the jury to say, you know what, we're not asking you to look at Cassie, right? She was a victim in all of this and blah, blah, blah. Look at Diddy. We want him. You know what I mean? We asking you to convict him of being involved in prostitution. Well, once again, if so you send somebody outside, let's say, for instance, Cassie went outside, Diddy's in the room, but no money ever exchanged hands from him, right? You would need that element to be something that the money exchanged hands from Diddy, right? Now, there was one testimony that the guy, the Punisher, basically said that Diddy threw out a wad of cash as if, they were putting on the show and saying, he was like, yeah, I like this shit, right? And you can look at that part as something, but the actual money being given for whatever show that, these guys came and put on, I'm talking about the guy, the Punisher now, whatever money that was had exchanged hands, it all came from Cassie. So let's say that Diddy sent Cassie outside of the room to go on 47th Street in New York, because that's where the Johns or the guys that would be out there that women would be driving by trying to pick up, take home to do whatever they're trying to do, right? And so Cassie went out there and basically was doing that. And let's say the police picked her up for trying to solicit prostitution and all of that. Could she then say, oh, you know what? No, I was doing this not for me, but I was doing this for my husband. Or I was doing this for my boyfriend. You know what I mean? But I'm thinking 9 times out of 10, I think they gave Cassie immunity from that perspective. So you can look at that as a whole nother way. So the guy coming to the room, but the prostitute involving in prostitution, they were saying basically flying somebody from out of state, in state. That was another thing that wasn't really mentioned. You know what I mean? Who's to say that the person that they were engaging in the situation with when they were at the hotel in New York, the Punisher dude, he's from Harlem, right? The other dude was Daniel Phillips. He's from New York. So both of those situations that we know of thus far, we don't know who they're gonna call. We probably got like 6 more weeks, right? Who they gonna call, right? So like I said, when they got to the male exotic dancer, Sheree Hayes, also known as the Punisher, he testified to having sex with Cassie at the request of Diddy, right? And said that the encounters were always consensual. So, because he requested, that you have sex with her, right? I mean, I don't really see, if somebody did that in their private relationship, like where's that, the prostitution from that perspective? Dude wasn't a prostitute. He testified that he wasn't a prostitute. You know what I mean? So basically, he testified that to having sex with Cassie at the request of Diddy, and said that the encounters were always consensual. He told the jury that he didn't get any cues of discomfort from Cassie. You know what I mean? This is basically what he was saying. He said, I didn't get any cues that it was uncomfortable or anything like that, and that, everything was good. So I don't see, like I said, once again, how this works well for the prosecution. And he basically said he didn't see any discomfort from Cassie, and that if he had, he would have stopped, right? Diddy's defense lawyers doubled down, asking if Hayes ever did anything to Cassie that she didn't want. Hayes replied no. He claimed it was consensual, right? So everything was consensual. Cassie was there. She was willing to do it. He said that she paid him, and all of these other things. So, like I said, I don't really see how it works for a criminal enterprise, when they having these things. Basically, the scenario I was there to create. Listen, Mr. The Punisher said the scenario I was there to create was going well. He said during cross-examination, Hayes basically said that his nerve-wracking experience testifying in the rapper's trial, right? Honestly, listen, he says, going into the courtroom, I thought I was prepared for it, but it was extremely nerve-wracking. He told Fox News, right? So I won't, he says, so I want to say, for almost the entire time of my testimony, I avoided eye contact. I avoided even looking in Diddy's direction. And then actually going into that environment, you can't really prepare yourself. And I had no idea that it was going to be that many people in there, right? In the rows and tables. So I want to say for about half of the testimony, I couldn't even locate where he was. It was a really intense atmosphere, if you will. You know what I mean? Like he's speaking about all of the people there. You know what I mean? The Punisher also admitted that he never really truly understood what part of my testimony was valuable to the prosecution. Ladies and gentlemen, this is another thing that wasn't being said, right? The Punisher basically said, Mr. Hayes basically said that he couldn't, he's like I said, he said, I never truly understood what part of my testimony was valuable to the prosecution. I really thought my testimony, because there was nothing negative, right? Nothing whatever, right? I really thought it was something that the defense would benefit from, he said. So this is what the Punisher said, out loud. This is an actual quote from him. He said, I didn't think that, what went on with me had anything that was detrimental to Diddy involving the prosecution, right? He said, I thought it would be more beneficial to Puffy's side of the argument, right? He said, I'm not a legal analyst or anything, but sometimes I said, well, maybe the prosecution just wants to question me and have everything in the case and defense in case the defense calls me, right? So that's a strategy also. So the Punisher basically saying he thought that the prosecution wanted to get him up there to ask him questions just in case the defense chose to call him, right? Because, dude, he's from Harlem. Diddy has close associations and friends in Harlem. You know, that's what Diddy was claiming, you know, the Harlem lifestyle and the whole 9 yards. He was claiming all of that, right? So he, like he said, basically, I'm not a legal analyst or anything, but sometimes I said, well, maybe the prosecution just wants to question me and have everything in case the defense calls me, Hayes added, because I really couldn't understand how I was significant to their case, but there's probably something there that I'm just not aware of, right? Basically, the Punishers, you know, and these are legal experts saying that the Punishers, Mr. Hayes' testimony did not help the prosecution. It just didn't. It just didn't. So like I said, you got people like Nancy Grace and all of these other people out here talking about, you know, yeah, they're laying out the RICO. No, they're not. No, they're not. You know, I guess, you know, if you speaking to a certain audience of people, right, and you want them to believe something, all you got to do is pound the table and say it enough and they'll believe it, right? When it comes down to the actual information and people doing their own research, you be like, well, like I said, and these are legal experts. Most of these people are saying that, hey, you know what? It just didn't benefit the prosecution at this time. The government is trying to put the pieces together for a RICO charge. But so far, the testimony of the Punisher and Kid Cudi did not help them, right? The Punisher, I believe, boasted the defense's position that all the activities were consensual. And I believe also that's what he did. Like I said, they were saying, oh, Cassie was doing this against her will. She didn't want to do it. The prosecution is basically from their client, Cassie, the prosecution is in possession of these alleged freak-off tapes, right? The ones that Cassie kept. But they chose not, when Cassie was on the stand, they chose not even behind the scenes to the jury in private, they chose not to show those tapes to the jury. That speaks volumes. Because if let's say for any good reason that in one of those tapes, Cassie looked like she was in pain or, you know, she was uncomfortable with her, that bolsters the prosecution's case that she was doing it against her will and being forced to do it, right? But let's say the other exists and she's seeming to be enjoying it. And so like, so much so that the jury looks at it and be like, she's enjoying it. Listen to what she's saying, X, Y, and Z, and all of the things that we you know, we can't put to it, right? Okay, then that's what's going on. So now it once again that doesn't bolster the prosecution's argument, right? So like I said, in Kid Cudi situation from that, and like I said, I believe when Kid Cudi and the Punisher, you know, they believe basically say, hey, you know what? All this activity was consensual, and that Cassie was a willing participant, stating he observed Ventura sighing or wincing. He did not basically witness Cassie sighing or wincing at Combs in repeated direction, right? Like, you know, like, you know, he, whatever, like when he's, you know, Diddy was giving her direction on how he wanted to, whatever. The Punisher also said that he felt like him and Cassie was actors and Diddy was the director, like directing his own porn movie, if you will, right? You know, from that perspective, that's another thing. That's a totally other thing too. Let's be clear. If what Diddy was doing was illegal, then every porn director should be locked up. Think about it for a minute. If what Diddy was doing was illegal, every person who directs porn, who pays the porn star guy and versus the porn star girl to get on film and have sex, they should be locked up. Right? Right? Simple. Because that's basically what Diddy, you know, was trying to do. You know, I don't think he was paying Cassie. I mean, he was taking care of her. You know what I mean? That was his girlfriend. But this was something that they were doing as a couple, right? Which makes it even more consensual, other than somebody shooting a porn movie and saying, okay, cool, you guys are going to do this. And then the director of the poem will be like, okay, this position, that position, whatever. And people watch it from that perspective. You see what I'm saying? So like I said, that's why, most of these legal experts are basically saying, hey, you know what the defense has shown thus far, what the prosecution has shown thus far does not cover any of the criminal elements of a RICO act, right? So like I said, with the situation, rather the unwillingness to participate, Cassie was always a willing participant, right? Furthermore, stating that he believed her experiences were completely natural, Kid Cudi's recount of the decades-old allegations also assisted the defense. Check it out now. Kid Cudi's recount of the decades-old allegation also assisted the defense, which was supported by the judge sustaining an objection by the defense when it came to a speculative statement that Mr. Combs committed burglary or arson, right? Basically, the defense objected to that Mr. Combs committed burglary or arson. That's what the prosecution was trying to But like I said, the defense basically objected that, right? Right? They objected to that. And the judge basically allowed their objection to stand. So when you, like, say for instance, you go to appeal the case, if they go to appeal the case, you go back over that, and you can say, well, Your Honor, we objected to that, right? Because as you look at the case and when they fill out the appeal, they put all of those elements in there and saying, hey, this is what this is why this is supported, and this is why it's not supported. So that objection basically stood as the prosecution was trying to, or should I say, Kid Cudi was basically trying to say, yeah, he broke into my house and he burnt my car down. Objection. Because there's no proof or evidence proving that, their client did anything from that perspective, right? Like I said, the police in the booth in both these allegations could not listen. The police was called. There was a police report made and all of these things, right? But the police in both of these allegations, in the breaking and entering and the arson, could not connect Sean P. Diddy Combs to the incidents. Like I said, it's one thing, like I said, to think and feel something. I feel like he did it, and blah blah blah. And some people act on their feelings, not really knowing the truth, which sometimes a lot of times doesn't benefit that person reacting to that, right? In both of those allegations of arson and breaking and entering, the police could not connect Sean P. Diddy Combs to the incidents, and the apology by Mr. Combs years later, in my opinion, is not an admission to anything other than, sorry, we had the issues regarding Cassie Ventura, because Kid Cudi testified that P. Diddy actually, they saw each other out, and Diddy apologized to him, say, yo, man, you know what? I'm sorry about the bullshit that happened, blah, blah, blah. So that he didn't say, yo, I'm sorry that I blew up your car, man. Here go 50,000, blah, blah. I'm sorry that we happened. And like I said, once again, for all intents and purposes, remember Kid Cudi said that he felt threatened, felt like his life was in danger and all of these other things. He never said that Diddy ever threatened him, right? Brian Steele got a Kid Cudi to admit, you said that Mr. Combs was talking to you on the phone and he was calm, correct? He didn't make any kind of threats, correct? Once again, a person's temperament at the time of this alleged engagement dealing with this situation. You know what I mean? So the government, like I said, the government put on, what else was that? The Homeland Security agent to show all the items seized by Mr. Combs from his house, right? The tactic is a continuation of the government trying to paint Mr. Combs as a bad actor, right? Nothing like, yo, he got guns in his house, were those illegal? Was he gun trafficking now? You know what I mean? All of these other things. The jury can convict because of a devious and reprehensible behavior, right? That's what the prosecutor is trying to say, right? You can convict him because he's a devious and he does these reprehensible things. So never mind the elements of RICO and all of those things. You can just find him guilty because you don't like him. He's rich, he's this, he hits women, he's all of these other things that they might not agree with, right? But the testimony of drugs, firearms, and baby oil still do not support the charges. as a lot of people like to make, the argument about the baby oil situation, right? The guns, the drugs. They don't support RICO. They just don't. They just don't. Like I said, if you understand what's been going on, with the whole situation involving this, right? And then we get to like Cassie's mom, Regina. Basically, and her former friend Carrie Morgan, right? Carrie Morgan, like I told you, was the girl who Diddy allegedly choked and hit her with a wooden clothes hanger, right? We're both called. Regina, basically, Cassie's mom, right? Testified for only 15 minutes. You know what I mean? So when they're making and bolstering this case, she testified for all of 15 minutes. And the fact of the matter is that her testimony was so short that the defense didn't even bother to cross-examine her. When it came to the judge's time to say cross, the defense was like, no questions, Your Honor. And they let her get up. You know what I mean? But like I said, they said that her testimony was basically impactful in certain ways, right? Regina also took pictures of Cassie's bruises, and they were shown to the jury. Combs was upset about Cassie's relationship. This is what she testified to, that Diddy was upset about Cassie's relationship with Kid Cudi, and Combs demanded that Cassie pay him, not Cassie's mom, that Cassie pay him, right? If Cassie refused, Combs said he would release 2 sex tapes of her and send someone to hurt her and Kid Cudi. Regina took out a home equity line to pay Combs the money. Now, pause, right? Once again, now this is what's being said. This is what's being alleged, right? So, don't know if it's true. I know the $20,000 was true because basically Miss Regina, she testified that she sent the money and that the money was quickly sent back to her from that perspective. And the reason why I think that was so, because remember, Diddy had paid Kid Cudi to work with Cassie. So Diddy wanted to be reimbursed for the money that he invested in Kid Cudi working with Cassie. And I think that was fair from that perspective, just letting Cassie mom know, not, because $20,000, he just paid Cassie $20 million, man. $20,000 wasn't no money from that perspective. You know what I mean? Based on what we understand, not trying to, count or nobody's pockets or nothing like that. Based on what we understand, like the testimony proved coercion, which is an element of sex trafficking, and extortion, which is a RICO predicate act, right? So basically, they're saying that that right there proved extortion. He never received the money, but this is how the situation goes about. Now you think about the Tupac situation and Keefe D, right? And Keefe D wanting to get his money, you know what I mean, from Diddy, for the $500,000, $1 million that Keefe D said that Diddy promised them, if they handled Tupac and should, you know what I mean? So you can kind of think about that, right? So basically, legal experts are saying that this testimony proved the $20,000. She took out a home equity loan or whatever. The testimony proved coercion, which is an element of sex trafficking, and extortion, which is a RICO predicate act. It also corroborates Cassie's account that she was beaten, and Combs used the freak-offs tapes as blackmail, right? So Carrie Morgan, basically, who claimed basically she saw Diddy become physically abusive with Cassie on a handful of occasions. One of the best witnesses so far, you know what I mean, that they're basically saying. So they're thinking that the $20,000 proves coercion, if you will, right? She basically, Carrie Morgan said she saw Combs punch and drag Cassie across the floor after the hotel attack. Remember, after the March 5th, 2016 hotel attack, Carrie Morgan basically explained that Combs came to Cassie's apartment and banged on the door with a hammer, right? Combs controlled every aspect of Ventura's life, her finances, her apartment, her car, and her career. This control explains the psychology of abuse and the evidence of coercion, basically, they're saying, for the sex trafficking. charges, right? Once again, I like to respectfully disagree. I like to say that Cassie was free to leave and never go back. When she went to, in 2011, when she went to her mother's house and Kid Cudi and her were together on Christmas and all of that, no matter what Diddy power was at that particular time, from that perspective, like I said, she was free to stay with her mom. She didn't have to go back to Diddy. She kept going back. Why? It was psychological. She just was no. She left Diddy and went with Kid Cudi. They were dating. Right? Simple as that. Diddy called her, yo, I want my money. Could you give me my money? Cassie owes me money. The mother, went to, what's her name? That's just asking for a refund, if you ask me. But like I said, that kind of proves coercion, because he needed the $20,000 or he just wanted his money back. Said Cassie should give him the money. The mother took it upon herself to what's her name? And that wasn't what Diddy told the mother. That was what Diddy allegedly told Cassie. Diddy didn't tell Cassie's mom, if you don't give me money, I'm going to take these tapes and put these tapes out about your daughter. That's not what happened, right? What happened was Cassie said that Diddy told her that, and threatened her not just there, on a numerous occasions, said when they was coming back from France, from the Cannes Film Festival, whatever, right? That they were on the plane and he threatened to do that, like, yeah, I'm gonna put this out, because they had an argument and so on and so forth. So that wasn't the first occasion that happened, right? And then one of Combs' other assistants, George Kaplan, testified under a grant of immunity, right? So George, right before George Kaplan testified, he was granted immunity. That he would pick up drugs for Combs and set up hotel rooms with baby oil and Astroglide for freak-offs. Basically, he also cleaned up drugs and hotel rooms after freak-offs. He also described a number of incidents where Combs was violent with Ventura on his private jet, with broken glasses, and in his home with Ventura having bruises on her face. This was more evidence of the criminal enterprise with Combs as the head. Right? So this is so domestic violence and the criminal enterprise, like, where's the, I'm like what crime? What's the benefit? What is the benefit? I don't get the benefit. If Cassie's calling Diddy his girl, I mean her boyfriend, and so on and so forth, I mean, where's the criminal enterprise, the relationship? How do we separate the two? I'm just trying to separate the two, right? The jury basically heard, at least from one expert witness, Dr. Dawn Hughes, right? A clinical psychologist, basically to provide blind testimony. Now, the clinical psychologist, she wasn't Cassie's psychologist. She wasn't Diddy's psychologist. She was just somebody coming to testify as an expert on what trauma, domestic violence. She was basically a domestic violence expert, if you will. And she provided blind testimony about why a person would stay in such an abusive relationship. The psychology expert was helpful to the prosecution in answering a lingering question that the jury most certainly has. If Cassie was being trafficked and forced to do all of these horrific things, why did she stay? The layperson would probably assume that she stayed because she had feelings despite Diddy's bad conduct. The expert was able to provide an alternative reason for emanating from the abuse trauma, where victims become controlled by the perpetrator and feel trapped and helpless. Right now, once again, she never interviewed Cassie, so she don't know how Cassie feels. Right. This is basically a blind testimony of generalization of how a person can feel based on this expert's experience, right? She testified it was about power and control abusers have over victims, which were the very buzzwords the prosecution needs for the trafficking charge, he said. She was helpful to the prosecution, both for providing a reason for Cassie staying other than she loved Combs, as well as the forced and coercion elements necessary for sex trafficking. So now, when you think about what this is and basically what they're trying to lay out, they're saying that And what they're not saying, see, in that part about the psychologist, right? What they're not saying is basically that Brian Steele, one of the defense attorneys on Diddy's side, basically was going to hire this Dawn lady, the lady named Dawn, and so he was going to hire her to work on a case that he had that involved domestic violence. I'm sorry, Dawn Hughes, domestic violence, and because the client that Brian Steele had at that time was a victim of domestic violence, but Brian Steele, who's Diddy's attorney in this case, chose not to use her. And what the defense was trying to prove is that she was really no expert as to what she was testifying to, but she was an expert involving domestic violence based on the fact that she was going to work with Brian Steele, who had a client at one time who suffered from domestic violence, right? Once again, like I said, usually when you say RICO Act, right? My thing is this, RICO Act, even from the guy Kaplan, right? Kaplan testified that he would go buy drugs, right? We don't know if he was buying those drugs for himself or buying them for Diddy, or he was participating in the party. We don't know. The guy, what was his name? David James admitted that he was, doing drugs and, taking ecstasy and all of those things, and he was working for Diddy. Diddy called him outside his house one time smoking weed. And he said Diddy called him. He asked him what he was doing. He was like, nothing. And Diddy quote said, if you man enough to smoke weed, you man enough to tell me. He said, if I catch you again, I'm going to fire you. Right? So, also the guy, David James, lied about filling out a police report. Right? So we're going to see basically, like I said, what happens next week. But a lot of what was testified to from the prosecution witnesses really didn't help the prosecution build their cases. You know what I mean? Like I said, Kid Cudi, the $20,000, like I said, coercion, you know what I mean? To further $20,000 to further $20,000 that Diddy didn't take, right? Once again, that would come from Cassie's mother, that Diddy never took the money. So we'll see how they look at that. Like I said, everybody gets a different look when it comes to certain situations, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody gets a different look. Diddy gonna get a different look than some of these other people who were charged with and had more evidence against them, but somehow got away scot-free with certain things. And like I said, once again, Sean P. Diddy Combs has nobody to blame but himself for being in the situation that he's in. Like I said, he's a serial domestic abuser, as we can see from the Cassie situation, like I said, with that videotape and all of the things that were being alleged, and from the pictures that were shown in the courtroom on different dates and times, other than the video that we've seen from the Intercontinental Hotel. You know what I mean? But like I said, at the end of the day, Cassie chose to stay. And so, J Mac, what's good? Arius Williams, BKNY 52. What do you say? He said he hates it, bro. Hustle hard, Jay Smooth, what's good? We say J Mac say, no, it does not. You just said you mad because the men are taking up for Diddy and not you. That equals you like eggplant. Case closed. Ooh. Wow. Nah, like I said, once again, a lot of people have this thing about somebody taking up for Diddy. What I've just read, basically discussed was not taking up for Diddy. It's basically information that if you're paying attention to the case, you could want to, like I said, people want to believe certain things just because they want to believe them. They can believe that if they want to believe it, right? You have a right to your feelings, but your feelings don't make you right. And if the evidence before you, like if somebody feels a certain way about something, but the truth of the matter before them says that what they're feeling has nothing to do with the actual evidence, then that's just what you feel. Ain't got a goddamn thing to do with reality. You know what I mean? You could feel like you shouldn't pay your rent this month, right? But the reality is that you didn't pay your rent and the motherfuckers didn't put a eviction notice on your door. But you just felt like you shouldn't pay it this month. The reality is, no, you didn't pay it, and there's consequences for you not paying your bills, right? Point blank, period. So when people say, yeah, like I said, some experts are saying that, hey, the $20,000, is a part of the coercion aspect of what that is and what that means. Who knows? Who knows how the jury is interpreting this information? Like I said, we also got his chef, his one-time chef, the young lady Jordan, coming up next week, I believe. And once again, Diddy did something to her, threw her out the house or something like that, and she sued him. I think she got like $500,000 from him. And so, that's, once again, that's violence. That's something that should have been pursued by the local authorities. It wasn't. It simply wasn't. And she settled the case. Everybody walked away amicably. You know what I mean? Like I said, so to say that it's a criminal enterprise, right? And saying that, a lot of this, covers the predicates of a criminal enterprise. There's certain thresholds that you must meet to prove that information. And like I said, one can't just say, oh, because I feel like, people taking up for Diddy. It's simply not true. You don't need to take up for him. Diddy got 10 lawyers that's taking up for him. I don't need to take up for him. He got 10 powerhouse lawyers taking up for him. And they got 7 or 8 prosecutors, taking up for the government. So that argument right there, that doesn't really fall on anything intelligent or anything substantive, man. Say J Mac, what do you say? It's an area says the jury needs to see the freak off videos. I think when Diddy puts up his case, you know what I mean, or however they're going to do, the defense is going to put up their case. I think they might show the freak off videos. They might show that, hey, you know what, Cassie was enjoying this. I think that would be one of the things that they probably would want to do from that perspective. Like I said, whether Diddy would take the stand or not is up to him. The funny part about this, people are infatuated with calling people weirdos, man. Like I said, for lack of a better term, you know what I mean? People call people weird. People call people weirdos, man. A lot. Like I said, people usually that's calling people weirdos are usually weirdos themselves, man. You know what I mean? They, for lack of a better term, right? People that's calling people weirdo, I don't know, man. I really don't know about that. Like I said, I choose to. If something's wrong, I choose to look at the basis of what's wrong and try to articulate that situation a way better than somebody saying something that you may not agree with and calling people weirdos, man. Yeah, hustle hard. I would have to agree. A lot of times, people who don't understand certain situations and it's beyond. Well, it shouldn't be usually above and beyond their comprehension, right? I think that, like I said, once again, when you understand that aspect of it, I think, that's basically what it breaks down to. You know what I mean? Does the person really understand and comprehend the law as it should be applied? You know what I mean? As it should be understood, right? Yeah. No, I said Diddy, Jay Smooth. I said Diddy does weird things. It's a lot of weird things that he does. See, when I said he does, I'm not calling him a weirdo. I said when he does weird things, like the part where Cassie testified that he would like other men semen on that. That's weird. That's a weird action that I can call specifically that is weird. Most men don't participate in activity like that. Like I said, but to say something is weird because one disagrees with somebody's point of view is out of line. State specifically what they're doing that is either weird and not that they're a weirdo, but state the action. Once again, the action that is weird. Not because a person doesn't have the ability to articulate what the action is, right? But saying, oh, he a weirdo. Or she a weirdo. You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? That's the part where, most people who can't express themselves or articulate what the action is. Yeah, Diddy having Cassie or anybody else take somebody, other man's semen, and they go in the next room and she said, yeah, take that and rub that. That's weird. That's not behavior becoming from a person who we understand Diddy to be, or any real man would do anything like that from that perspective. You would say Carla Shepherd, then yeah, he said that the phrase fit. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, people entitled to whatever they want to say, but I'm saying, like I said, once again, that just bodes well for a basic conversation. Oh, I'm not in my feelings at all, man. I'm good. I'm like I said, we having a conversation, man. Hell, what's good? Yeah, a lot of people do think it's a crime to disagree with the way that they think. Like I said, once again, then they tried to make it personal from that perspective. But like I said, a lot of times that's not really what it is. People are just expressing their feelings, and like people get all in their feelings about, certain things. And like I said, once again, not protecting anybody. We're talking about facts. If you can have a conversation about what it is, then you can have a conversation. Say, but Carla Shepherd, she deleted Jay Smooth's what's the name? When you think Jay Smooth was being a little disrespectful, a little too much in his or her feelings. We don't know who Jay Smooth is. What was it? Yeah. This we ain't dealing with nothing but facts. I mean, people can articulate their opinion, but like I say, once you start getting personal, it shows more about you than it does about the person who you're talking to. Like I said, once again, one can, try to articulate their point of view, and that's what we're here for. Yeah, absolutely. Hell, I just said that too. That Diddy can't blame nobody but himself for being in the situation. Absolutely. Like I said, a lot of people, man, that's why, I think a lot of times us as African Americans, we find ourselves in a lot of shit because a lot of us don't understand a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? But we masquerade running through life as we know when we really don't know. And the crime is not knowing, the crime is not wanting to know once you're explained what you need to do, right? You know what I mean? So if you telling me, giving me some game, and you telling me, hey man, you know what? This what you need to do. This how you need to do it. This what you should do, right? And after I make a mistake and you telling me that and I don't do it, then I can only blame myself now. Because I was given the information, but I chose not to act on the information that I was given. You see what I'm saying? I think a lot of us find ourselves in situations like that because we don't do that. You know what I mean? Diddy included. So, hey, and him doing what he did to Cassie, like I said, 100% wrong. 100% wrong. Does it break down to where people are given immunity to come in and testify who allegedly, and like I said, most of the people that testified didn't admit that they were involved in a criminal activity or in a criminal enterprise, right? Or to further a criminal enterprise, if you will. So usually the elements under which somebody falls under the RICO situation is that they're furthering to enhance a criminal enterprise, right? None of the people that have testified for the prosecution have said that they were doing such a thing, if you will. You know what I mean? And so when they lax that, from that perspective, then I think that's the problem that I see when somebody say, yeah, he was running the RICO Act. Well, these people that testified, well, they were given immunity, they were part of it, so he bought drugs. That's not furthering any kind of criminal organization or criminal enterprise, if you will, because he went and bought drugs. Oh, he cleaned up the hotel room? Nah, that's not furthering criminal enterprise. That's being an assistant and doing what you're asked to do, under any circumstances. So, where that brother Jay Smooth go at, man? Jay Smooth, you gone? Where Jay Smooth go at? He said, big man. He said, you big man. Jay Smooth said, J Mac, big man, my mind don't even go that way. Sorry, weirdo. These niggas is wild, man. Oh, man. Well, Jay Smooth, you a lot of times people settle for the embarrassment though, right? Rich people, like I said once again, you settle for the embarrassment. You know what I mean? I mean, he could have went to court, and tried to fight that out. But once again, when you got an empire to protect, right? You don't want all of that embarrassing stuff. And then once he settled, most people felt like that the what's the name? Hey, Carla, let Jay Smooth talk. Let Jay Smooth talk, Carla. If he ain't saying nothing real disrespectful, I'll let you know. But if Jay Smooth, if somebody's doing something, and they're running a business, 9 times out of 10, businesses and people settle not because they're guilty, but 9 times out of 10, it's like, you know what? Let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. You know what I mean? It's just as simple as that. But I understand. Like I said, everybody has their own opinion, man. I have mine and you have yours, and then there's the facts. And then there's the things that people are testifying to. So, like I said. He said Anna Lee Gals and Jay Smooth big man tonight. Yeah, like I said, I don't people who got in their personal feelings, man, that ain't got nothing to do with me. Nah, I don't think Diddy will take the stand. I don't think he does good on the cross-examination. Right? And like I said, that would set up, for him to, I guess, like certain things, and then, there would be a lot of objections from his defense team. You know what I mean? Once again, the government has the burden of proof, right? The government has Jay Smooth said, no, I'm not. If I was weird enough to do those things, it is what it is. Yeah, I don't even know what that means. But like I said, but yeah, I don't think Diddy will take he'll take the stand from that perspective. I don't think he'll do good on cross-examination. Yeah, I mean, I would, like I said, I wonder if the dude Bonds is gonna take the stand on Diddy's behalf. I see the dude Bonds, the other security guard who was dead at the time. At one time, should I say, I think Bonds. I wonder if he gonna take the stand on Diddy's behalf, right? Because he testified on Vlad that Cassie would hit Diddy too. So and they would have these fights. So, I don't know how much that would mean. Like I said, if people have their mind made up of what they want to focus on and all of those things, then sometimes some of that stuff wouldn't even matter, right? Wow. No, Face Finster. No, see, once again, this is where we like Face Finster. What you say? Kid Cudi made Cassie look bad. No, Kid Cudi didn't. Cassie made Cassie look bad. Kid Cudi just told the story. See what I mean? There has to be accountability. Kid Cudi basically said that Cassie played him and Diddy, and Kid Cudi didn't even know. So this is what I'm saying. Somebody who's conscious, conscious, they strong, they understand what they're doing, they understand the mistakes that they're making, because somebody tell the story about what happened, his car being blown up and then attributing it to Diddy. And then also admitting that Cassie gave Diddy Kid Cudi's address. That came out in testimony too. That Cassie gave Kid Cudi. I'm sorry. Cassie gave Diddy Kid Cudi's address. Right? So, the accountability has to go where it lays. And then like, hey, man, he did that. Yeah, you did that. Right? It's just that simple. Ain't no, like I said, you feeling sorry for one person based on what you feel inside. Okay, right. You have a right to your feelings, but your feelings don't make you right. Was Cassie right for giving a Diddy Kid Cudi address? Answer that. What's up, Ma Dizzle? Ann and Lee Iceman. Carla Shepherd, always a pleasure. Yeah, and like I said, in innocent as they hope to portray her, Carla, you know what I mean? But like I said, yeah, I'm just looking at the testimony, man. I'm just looking at the testimony. I'm not trying to formulate no thoughts as to whatever somebody is. This is a lot of shit that we didn't know nothing about as people in the public. This is a public case playing out in the public, and this is just what's going on. Like I said, anybody choosing to choose to vilify Diddy, you have a right to your feelings. But does that make your feelings coincide with the facts and what's being said? No. That's the same reason if somebody wants to be on Diddy's side, right? Does that make what they're saying about Diddy and being on Diddy's side right? No. Right? But they have a right to their feelings, but their feelings don't make it right. The thing that matters is what we're hearing. And what we're hearing from, Kid Cudi, Cassie's mom, Mr. Kaplan, Miss Hughes, Don Ricard, all of these people, right? Okay, cool. A lot of people testified to seeing violence and so on and so forth. All of these people, right? Once again, and if I may go back, right? Look, I want y'all to understand something because this is what a lot of people are missing, right? A lot of people are missing, right? I'm gonna say it like this: reasonable doubt. That basically what the legal experts are saying is that reasonable doubt looms very heavily in these first few weeks of trial. The prosecution will need to bring out additional victims, right, that are not girlfriends of Diddy's to separate a romantic, emotionally charged relationship from actual sex trafficking, right? And to me, if you don't have one, you can't have the other. My thing is, if you don't prove sex trafficking, you can't prove coercion. You can't have that one without the other because the underlying main act that they're saying is, hey, sex trafficking. But if sex trafficking is not proven based on all of the people that they're bringing out to the case, right, are basically people, right, who Diddy had a relationship with. It's like, what? So he was sex trafficking his girlfriends? Based on what? Or were they participate? Because listen, remember, even in Cassie saying that Diddy wanted other men's ejaculation on his nipples, right? Even him saying that, they're saying first that Cassie would be with the other guy. I guess that would some way and somehow get Diddy off, right? Okay, now, and dealing with that aspect of it, then he said that Cassie and Diddy would then go into another room, right? So this was something that was consensual in nature. And then the Punisher dude, he came back out one time and he was asked, he said that Cassie asked him, did he want to finish? Like, I guess finish being with her and, having his climax or whatever. And he was like, nah, he just wanted his money to leave. You see what I'm saying? So once again, from that perspective alone, that tells you the environment of what that was. This is not me saying it. This is just simply coming from what the testimony was. Okay, so we sit back and we look at that like, okay, that seemed like they was in it together. That's not, he made her do it and, conjuring up all of these. Well, I think, and I feel, Yeah, I think and I feel a lot of things too. But is that shit relevant to this case? Nope. You know what I mean? We talking about people that don't know even know we exist at this particular time, right? We just listening. Yup. That's just what that is. So it would say the Suburbia Jones effect would say Cassie is just the queen pin, is the female Kaiser Soze from the movie The Usual Suspect. Yeah, that was one of my favorite movies right there. That was a dope movie, man. That was a dope movie. I think Kevin Spacey won an Oscar off of that, right? He said what? He said Meek Mill says Diddy parties gave Coke vibes. Right. Mo Better. My thing is, why didn't she express to the sex workers that she was captive once they would communicate, never ask for help? Right. Once again, yeah. Like I said, it's a lot of what ifs, whys, and so on and so forth. Like I said, you know, her going on tour, then she gets settled the money, then she canceled the tour. She don't have to do that no more. You know what I mean? She ain't had to go get no money no more. Now, you know, she got $20 million from Diddy, $30 million from the Intercontinental Hotel. And yeah, that's basically what it is. You say, do I think that they would call Gene Deal to testify? I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't know. You know, that's up to the prosecution or the defense. Like I said, you know, yeah, I wouldn't know that. Yeah, thank you, Ann and Lee. I appreciate it. Now, like I said, I'm just trying to, you know, when you talk about being informed, someone considering themselves to be informed, you know what I mean? Let's talk. Let's have a conversation about something substantive. You know what I mean? If you can't sit down and have a conversation and have some kind of knowledge and some wisdom and some understanding about what you're about to talk about, then it's best that you don't even talk. You know what I mean? At the very end of the day, just don't say nothing. You know, it's better if you don't say something. You know, so that's how I like to do it. I like to sit down, read, understand what's going on, listen for myself, basically decipher what's relevant, what's irrelevant, and like I said, what's being told to us in the media in one hand, and then what's really going on in the courtroom. Like I said, I don't. When you said what's that? Through Munger, he said asking how would Gene Deal get destroyed? I don't know. I don't know what Gene Deal knows. You know what I mean? From that perspective, I don't know what Gene Deal knows as it pertains to this case. I'll give you a prime example. Tony Busby filed a lot of cases, right? Alleging all of these people, and it was Jane Doe's, John Doe's, whatever. Alleging all of these people were mistreated or something happened with them dealing with Diddy. He promised like 100 cases, right? And so that they were met with their own adversity as far as him being in the practice law in the 2nd District. Okay. And so now, with that being said, understanding what that is, you would think that a lot of those people that Tony Busby alleged that, you know, had been wronged by Diddy would have been picked up by the prosecution in this case to show by example, because all of these people couldn't have been girlfriends, right? Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. We're just trying to get you to think now. Think critically. So all of these people that Tony Busby allowed in these lawsuits, you don't think the prosecution should have been like, hey, you know what? I want to meet with that person, right? You know, I want to meet with that person to find out whether, you know, the facts or the stuff that happened to them is any way connected, or we can use that as evidence to show a pattern of behavior. Remember, I told you, it's going to take more than just girlfriends, you know, of Diddy's to you know, come in and be like, yeah, he did me wrong, and then when I left, he ain't give me no money. You know, he did me wrong, and then I was trying to have a career in music and whatever. You know, it's going to take a little bit more than that to be able to prove what they're trying to prove. And I'm saying those people in those cases involving Tony Busby, you would think a lot of those people would be brought into the criminal case to basically testify what happened to them. None of those people were brought in, ladies and gentlemen. Doesn't that say something? Doesn't that say something? It says a lot, right? Because if you know, the prosecution is alleging over 2 decades. Okay, some of these people alleging Tony Busby in his cases, they were talking about, some of these people are alleged to be like 9, 8, 10 years old. You know what I mean? Right? Remember, they told us about the Jay-Z and the young lady and all of that. That was dismissed. Tony Busby's now being sued by Jay-Z and the young lady for defamation. And like he said, Tony Busby said on Piers Morgan the other day, a lot of that information will come out in court. We hope so. You know what I mean? But 9 times out of 10, it'll get settled. It'll get settled. Yeah, it'll get settled. Everybody postures and they talk and let's like, dude, whatever. Like I said, when it came out that Jay-Z and Diddy had allegedly something to do with this young lady and they done it wrong, you heard people coming out the woodworks what they hate. What you think? I don't know. I wasn't there. But I do know some people that was. And they said that this young lady wasn't at the party. Or whatever party she talking about. Diddy was with J-Lo that night. And J-Lo was right there. And what they did was they took pictures from off the internet. Created a scenario around the pictures that they found on the internet. Of Diddy being at a party. Jay-Z was there. And they tried to place this a fictitious person at this party. Right? And found somebody who would go along, and which the young lady said that she was coerced and pressured by Tony Busby to file and go and include Jay-Z in the lawsuit. But mind you, the lawsuit was dismissed for Diddy and Jay-Z. So if Diddy in jail, he can really hardly fight. So why was it dismissed for him too? If the lawsuit was amended and Jay-Z was added later, then why was it dismissed for Diddy too? Critical thinking. And like I said, a lot of people lack that ability to be able to put aside their emotions and what they feeling and how they feeling, right? To be even understand the facts, because they don't even give a damn about facts. They just want to go with what they feel, you know? Well, it's like I said, who's that? Through manga. It's not that Gene hasn't dealt with lawyers, right? When we talk about going into a situation like this, a federal case like this, there's certain elements that they're trying to capture, and certain people that they want to use to try to capture those elements. Like I said, once again, will they call Gene Deal? I don't know. Have they contacted Gene Deal? I think you best be able to ask him and what that is, or listen to his podcast. Like I said, he's over there on the Art of Dialogue. They're doing real good numbers over there, so you might want to pay attention to that. I don't know if they're gonna call Gene Deal or not. You know what I mean, from that perspective. But like I said, at the end of the day, when you think about the underlying element, like a lot of times, sometimes witnesses can muddy cases up, or the testimony. Like you see a lot of the witnesses they bring up so far, the prosecution brought them up for whatever they brought them up for. But a lot of the legal experts are basically saying that, hey, you know what? A lot of the testimony that they gave did not benefit the prosecution. Some look kind of like it did, but some didn't. You know what I mean? And so it just remains to be seen. So what did he say? Yeah. Like I said, a lot of people are emotionally invested. And like I said, it really doesn't matter about your emotions. It's like, once again, we are all sitting here watching what's being said and it being played out in front of us, right? Everybody has an opinion. You know what I mean? A lot of people listening for what they want to listen for, but if it's something that doesn't benefit their argument, they quickly turn off their ears because that's not what they want to hear. You know what I mean? So. You say Freddie line for a check. Who's Freddie? say Lionel Nation said that they can't call anyone. Oh, okay. Okay, got you. So, yeah, Lionel Nation, yeah. Oh, he said they can't call anybody that sat in the courtroom. Okay, that might be true because they've heard testimony from what the testimony going off. They can kind of trademark their testimony after somebody else. Oh, you said Freddie from Making of the Band. Yeah, like Freddie from Making of the Band. Like, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, once again, I just listen to people, man, and hear what people saying, man. And like I said, once again, I can only just listen to it. You know what I mean? I wasn't there. I don't know. Like I said, a lot of times, people say things because that's what they feel, man. You know what I mean? Like I said, will it matter? Like I would think that Freddie seemed like he has a lot of information. I was wondering why they didn't call him. You know what I mean? He was in Making of the Band. Like I said, I don't know if the girl Sarah from Making of the Band is going to testify, but I do know that she filed a lawsuit against Diddy separate from this case. Something civil, right? And Ariel Mitchell is her attorney. So, like I said, once again, this is approximately 6 more weeks, they're saying, of this trial. And so what we're going to see, hopefully, is a little bit more evidence pointing to what they claim to be evidence in regards to racketeering and all of the elements that need to be, under the racketeering situation. No, that's not that wouldn't be true. That wouldn't be true. The young lady, what was her name? Mila Morales. She did a lot of interviews and she testified. She was the makeup artist. So she was on, different platforms and things like that, as well as CNN and a few other places. She actually sold CNN some pictures of Cassie. That kind of discredited her testimony, for she sold the pictures of Cassie for $1,000. Empire Kane was good. Limitless was good. Hell was good. But like I said, Gene Deal over there on the Art of Dialogue, y'all can check that out. That's doing real crazy numbers over there, man. You know what I mean? Y'all might want to check that out. Freddie P over there he doing great numbers too. Like I said, once again, like I said, but that atmosphere, what that was and what that is a world unto itself, if you want it. You know what I mean? People who were involved know more than we do. You know what I mean? From that perspective. So sometimes I just sit back and listen, and I could kind of decipher, what it is that I would like to entertain and what I like to entertain. But my personal feelings, I really don't feel anything. I just know, okay, cool. And I'm just looking for consistencies and inconsistencies, right? In what somebody's saying. You see what I'm saying? And sometimes even then, it's like, it doesn't even matter because what does it actually mean at the end of the day? Limitless, what's good? Peace. Hustle hard, absolutely. You know what I mean? For whatever reason they don't, that's their business. But like I said, ladies and gentlemen, y'all know Monday is Memorial Day, so it won't be no court. So everything gonna pick up on Tuesday. And hopefully it becomes a little bit more entertaining as we sit back and we give our time to what this is, the Diddy trial. Like I said, I do feel like, man, a lot of the karma that Diddy, like I said, I want to deal specifically with the Tupac situation, right? And what Keefe D said. And the temperament that Diddy has. And him doing what he did to Cassie. And I can see, something as big as Tupac coming out of jail and just bombing and just like, you know what I mean? I can see how that could have affected Diddy in a major league way. Because remember, when Tupac went to jail, they dropped that Who Shot You. Everybody, oh man, it didn't have. And then you see the same thing kind of going on with that, not in the courtroom, but in the court of public opinion, where people saying like, oh, they did that song before, but no. It was directly, loosely based at Tupac, because Tupac had been shot. Basically, that's what it was. And so now we kind of see the same thing and we hear what Keefe D said. And that's why I said the situation with Keefe D said, when he initially said everything that he said, it was plausible based on the fact that He was naming people that we didn't know that was involved with a lot of the stuff that was going on. And so with that being said, it's just simply what it was. Simply what it was. So like I said, we got Keefe D next year, February. So that's going to be interesting too, because like I said, Diddy, and the thing whether Diddy gets convicted or not is going to play a big role, because this name going to come up in that trial too. Diddy's actually lucky. I would say Diddy is lucky that Keefe D, the judge in Keefe D case, agreed to let that trial be held over until next year. Because if that trial was held at the same time as this was going on, and they were presenting that evidence against Diddy that Keefe D had said in his initial doing the proffer agreement, the jury would be tainted by that. Be like, oh, this guy is responsible for helping kill the Tupac. And then you would think about the money that he paid, to Cassie. And it's like, oh, people would start to, they could start to kind of link two and two, even though they might not link at all. Once again, you're dealing with people and their feelings and how their opinions on things, right? So the optics of that would look real crazy, if you will, from that Diddy trial going on, Keefe D trial going on. And they're saying about Diddy, talking about, this meeting at Greenblatt's, and, I want Diddy, I want, Suge and Tupac handled it and all of that. That definitely would play into this case, this trial that's going on right now. So Diddy kind of got lucky on that one, or whatever you want to call it. You want to call it luck. Yeah, karma, baby, karma, absolutely. Yeah, that's true. Unless it's real, like I said, when somebody got real proof, then yeah, it's easy. A lawyer, he'll definitely file a law. If you got pictures and shit like that, that's the reason why Diddy settled the case with Cassie. Cassie had pictures, just his reputation, and then she talked about the free calls, right? Oh, I don't think he wanted to. And like I said, we found out about the semen with all of that being all of that stuff. I don't think he wanted none of that out there, but it's out there now anyway, despite what he wanted. You know what I mean? So if nothing else, his career is over. He's been humiliated. Like I said, in trying to link the assets that he accumulated for Bad Boy and all of the other stuff that he had, because under RICO they try to take your assets. Like I said, that's a whole nother thing. But all of that's in jeopardy. We'll see how it plays out versus what's in his name, what's not in his name. You know what I mean? Was he careful about how he set up his business structure, his trust, and all of the other things that when you try to protect your assets, right? We're going to see how well that falls under any kind of situation where, hey, you know what? Wasn't in his name to begin with. It was in his mama's name. He transferred that 15 years ago. You know what I mean? And so will they be able to take anything at all? You know what I mean? So a lot of that, like I said, is going to play out, and we're going to see exactly what happens, like I said, beginning on Tuesday. Ladies and gentlemen, like I always say, more importantly than that, like, yo, this new book right here, ladies and gentlemen, y'all got to go pick this up, man. Behind the Walls with Tupac Shakur. It's on Amazon, ladies and gentlemen. And by the author Donald Richardson. He's no relation to me at all. Like I said, this book right here talks about Tupac when Tupac was at Rikers. Nobody's ever told this story. It's exclusive information. It talks about the Diddy situation, Haitian Jack, Jimmy Henchman, the Ayanna Jackson situation, Tupac being involved with guards, female guards in the jail, having sex with female guards in the jail, and the whole 9 yards. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, man, this book is a great read. It's not that long of a read. It's approximately, I think, 106, 108 pages, something like that. Like I said, but it's a great read, and it goes in from when Tupac first got the Rikers before he had to go to Clinton Correctional Facility. Like I said, as you see on the front of the cover right there, that's Pac, and the guy, Donald Richardson. On the back is Donald Richardson. Like I said, they standing in front of a jail cell. Talk about you know, how they got the camera in the jail to take the pictures and the whole story behind that. Like I said, as you read the back of the book, you can see this guy Donald Richardson did like 23 years in and out of institutions in the New York tri-state area. He talks about all of those. Like I said, I did the interview on all the dialogue. Should be released sometime soon. I'm not sure exactly when it's going to be released, but like I said, more importantly, go cop the book. The book is always something that, you know, one would want to immerse themselves in and to find out. Like I said, there's a lot of exclusive information that I never knew anything about. So like I said, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your time more than anything. Your boy DELRAY, yeah, straight gang.
Life is like those cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.